that it can be recorded and posted to ODM's EVV webinars page. So today's webinar is Building Blocks for Accessing EVV. This is a quick sound test. We are testing sound at this time. The screen is displaying what anybody who is currently not able to hear me talking can do. They can reach out to the Ohio Department of Medicaid website if they have any issues hearing. But this is basically just a stop point for anybody to make sure that they can hear us and know that there is sound happening at this time before we move forward. All attendees for today's webinar have been put on mute. So to ask a question, you can select the chat icon and type your question in the box displayed, and that chat icon appears in the webinar bar on your screen. And once you access the chat area, it should show up on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and you can type your question in. Your instructor and the EVV team will answer as many questions as possible that are submitted via that chat function during the time allotted at the end of the webinar. For easier viewing of today's webinar, you may click the Enter Full Screen button in the webinar window to make the presentation larger on your screen. To get back to the window where the chat box displays, hover over the top middle of your screen to see the webinar bar, then click View Options, and finally click Exit Full Screen. Today we're going to cover getting started in MITS, so setting up an account in the MITS system, locating your Medicaid Provider ID, getting access to SANDATA's EVV system, and ensuring your provider information is current. We're going to start with how you get started in MITS. To log into ODM's Medicaid Information Technology System, or in other words, MITS portal, providers must first create a MITS web portal account. Providers would need their 7-digit Ohio Medicaid ID to create that account. To set up the account, providers would first navigate to the MITS public website that is currently displayed on the screen. And if you're concerned about not having enough time to jot this address down, the slides for today's webinar will be posted on ODM's EVV Initiatives page under the webinars section. So you will have access to this link and all of this information through that webinar section later. We'll be showing you where that's located at the end of the webinar. So after navigating to the MITS web portal link, you would click under the Provider Setup or Registration section. So if you'll notice on the right-hand side of the screenshot that's listed on this page, which is a screenshot of what that MITS public portal, provider portal page looks like, there are boxes listed along the right-hand side of the screen in a column. And one of those boxes is called Provider Setup Registration. There's a link that says, click here to set up your account. And that's the link that you would click to get started. Next, you'll be brought to an account setup login screen, and you will be asked to enter your 7-digit Provider Medicaid ID in the Login ID field. Then you would enter the last 4 digits of your Employee Identification Number, or EIN, or Social Security Number, or SSN, in the PIN field. Once you have entered information into both of those fields, there is a button in the middle of the screen called Set Up Account. And this is the button that you would want to click to move forward with setting up your account. Now, if you have any issues with putting in your information or addressing this screen, there is text on the screen here for you, letting you know that if you need assistance logging in, you can call the ODM Provider Assistance line, and that is that 1-800-686-1516 number. Now, the next screen after you click Set Up Account is going to give you the Ohio Medicaid Information Technology Systems Provider Web Portal User Agreement. So this is basically the rules of the road in using the MITS portal. You would read through the provider user agreement, and then there's a checkbox beneath the text that says, yes, I have read the terms of service agreement. So once you have read through, if you agree, you would check that box and then click the I agree button. Next, you'll be brought to the Register as a Provider page, and you'll be asked to type in the required registration information. Now, the required information is called out by field with an asterisk next to each field, but it's also been called out in your screenshot with the red required option to the right. So if you were to try to submit your information without one of those pieces of information present, you are going to see that red required box show up to the right of it. The required fields include your first name, last name, email address, and then user ID, password, and then you'll be asked to confirm your password. When selecting your user ID and your password, there is text on the screen to the right, actually on the portal itself, that gives you some guidelines for what you should select when you are choosing a user ID, and guidelines for what you should have in place when you are selecting a password. So be sure to take a look at those guidelines before filling out those fields. But once all of your required information has been entered, you can click the Register button that shows up at the bottom of the screen. Please do note that after you submit your registration information, a message will display indicating a successful registration. But it does take a few moments just to get all of your information in place on the back end of the system. So please wait about 10 minutes for the information to fully process and complete before trying to log in as that user and access the site. Now, depending on the setup of your organization, you may be the only user for your MITS account. And if that's the case, you only need to set up an administrator account, which are the steps that we have just walked through. If you are not the only user for your MITS account, you would need to take additional steps of, number one, setting up an agent account, and then number two, assigning agent roles to those accounts. And additional instructions for these steps can be found at the web address that is currently listed on the screen. And again, this address will be posted in these slides, which will be posted to the webinar section of ODM's EVV Initiatives webpage. Next, we're going to cover how to locate your Medicaid Provider ID. Now, if you are a DODD, or a Department of Developmental Disabilities provider, then you would locate your Ohio Medicaid Provider ID through your DODD portal. And the first step to do this is to navigate to the dodd.ohio.gov webpage. And there's a screenshot of that webpage and what it would typically look like on the screen at this time. And the web page itself is also called out with the red arrow and red box on the screen. Now, once you are on that web portal, I'm going to back up once here. Notice that there is a login button located to the right of the Department of Developmental Disabilities logo on this web page. You would click that login button to log in as a provider. And it will bring you to the screen that is currently displayed. So you would be asked to put in your username and your password. So you would enter your provider username and the password that are associated with your DODD contract number. And once you have entered that information, you would click Sign In. You will next be directed to this page. To access any DODD applications, including the PSM application, you would click the blue Applications link that shows up at the top of this page. This will bring you to a screen that lists all available applications in a drop-down menu on the right-hand side of the page. you would select the PSM portal application from the drop-down box, and then click the Load Application button that shows up to the right of that drop-down. That will bring you to a screen that looks like this. And on that screen, there is a blue Provider Certifications box with some text beneath it that says, click here to view current contracts and pending certification applications. Existing providers would click the box labeled Provider Certifications, or in other words, that link that shows up. Now, once you click that link, you're going to see the contract numbers that are currently available under your username and password. And you would click the contract number that you are currently trying to view. You're going to see the name of that account, your provider type, your status. Contract number is the field all the way to the left, and you would click on the actual number itself. That's going to bring you to a page that looks like the screenshot that's currently on the screen. You're going to see a menu of black menu options on the left-hand side of the page, and whatever option you select is going to display information on the right-hand side of the page. And this is your DODD PSM Provider Dashboard. One of the options on the left is Medicaid information. It's currently called out with a yellow box and a red box on this screen and a red arrow pointing to it. So you would click that Medicaid information section, and it will bring you to a screen that looks like this. Once you're on the Medicaid information section, on the right-hand side of this screen, you're going to see your provider demographics. So it will show your contract number, it'll show your status, some information about you as a provider. And then at the bottom of that screen, you're going to see Provider Medicaid information. You'll have each of your MITS contracts listed, and then the column to the right of that is where your 7-digit Ohio Medicaid Provider ID number would be displayed. Now, if you are an ODA provider, you would find your Medicaid Provider ID by a slightly different process. And for you, it starts by navigating to the Ohio Department of Aging's webpage, specifically the Find Services page. So you would follow the web link that's currently listed on this screen, and it would bring you to a page that is currently shown by the screenshot that's on this slide. Now, the first thing that you would do is find the number for your local passport administrative agency, or PAA. To do this, you'd want to verify the region that you are located in, and you're given a couple different options to do this on ODA's webpage. In the screenshot on the left-hand side of this page, there's a red box calling out the Map tab that shows up on the webpage. So you can just look at the map, look at your county or find your county, and see the number for your region and where it's located. The other option, if you're looking at the right-hand side of this screen, there's a tab called Counties by Region, and you can also select that tab and then just read the counties that are included in each region. And that's how you would verify what region number you are. Once you have that verified, the next step is to look on the right-hand side of that web page, because you're going to see each region listed out, and there's a little arrow located to the left of that region. You would click on the region that you have identified as being in, and that's going to expand that region to show additional information about the region. The information that's displayed includes the Area Agency on Aging, or AAA, and Passport Administrative Agency, or PAA, and then some additional information such as you see in the screenshot for Region 1. You see the Council on Aging of Southwestern Ohio, an address is given for that, and then there's also a phone number. This is the phone number that you would call in order to ask about what your Medicaid Provider ID would be. Now, if you have a passport contract with the Catholic Social Services, or CSS, you would select PAA2 and then the CSS information would be listed. So if you were to scroll down under that region, you'd see additional information listed, and that's what you would be looking for. Now, if you are an ODM provider, chances are you already know your Medicaid Provider ID. However, if you need help logging into your MIS account, you would need to contact ODM at that ODM provider assistance line that we mentioned earlier, and that is 1-800-686-1516. And it's good to note that when you do call in, there are a couple pieces of information that are required in order to verify and identify who you are as a provider. So 2 pieces of information are needed, but those 2 pieces of information can be any of the following 3 items. So it could be your National Provider Identifier, or your NPI, your 7-digit ODM Medicaid Provider ID, or your tax ID. Just keep in mind that the information you enter into the phone to identify who you are as a provider must match what ODM has on file for your Provider Medicaid ID. That's how they verify who you are. Next, we're going to review accessing SANDATA's EVV system and the criteria to do that. To access SANDATA's EVV system, it's good to note that providers must first take training, and this is one of the most important criteria for accessing the system. Now, depending on whether or not you are a brand new provider who is just applying for your provider ID and setting up your provider agreement with ODM, or if you are a provider who has been using EVV for a while and you just want to learn about the additional features that have been added to EVV for phase 2 of the EVV program, there are different links for you to select to access the appropriate training for you. So the best recommendation is to go to ODM's EVV training page for more information on the different types of training and to be able to select the appropriate link to register for the appropriate training. And that web page is currently listed on this slide. It is the ODM EVV Initiatives webpage /training. And a note about that training is that providers must register for training using their Medicaid Provider ID. And that's one of the reasons why we've been talking about how to locate that ID and the importance of making sure you know what that is, because it's the Medicaid Provider ID that is assigned to providers by ODM, and when a provider is approved to provide services, and that is the ID that is sent over to SANDATA with each provider's name and their information. So the only way that SANDATA will be able to recognize that a provider has taken training is by their Medicaid Provider ID and a notation of whether or not somebody with that ID has successfully completed training in the learning management system. And that's a little bit of a preview into this slide. So the key to training completion is to ensure that SANDATA's learning management system, or LMS for short, has your correct 7-digit Medicaid Provider ID listed in it. You would not be marked as having your EVV training completed by SANDATA if the ID that you listed in LMS is not your 7-digit Medicaid Provider ID. So at this point, you may be wondering, well, did I enter the correct ID into LMS when I registered? Or how do I go back and fix that if you may know that you didn't enter the correct ID when you registered? So we're going to review the steps for how you can log into LMS and check on that right now. The first step is to use the following website that's listed to log in with the same credentials that you used when you first set up an account in LMS, or the Learning Management System. So to get to the general login page, you would go to the www.sandatalearn.com page, and it will bring you to a login screen that's currently displayed on this slide. And it'll ask for your username and your password, and you could log in. Once you are logged in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, there's an icon that looks a little bit like a menu, almost like a bookmark. This is the menu settings icon, and this is what you would want to click to see additional options, including your profile information. So step 3, once that menu icon has been clicked and expanded, there would be an option to edit your profile, and this is what you would click next. And then it would expand that option even further to where you could change your password for your profile or edit your information. And edit your information is the same as also viewing your information. So this is what you would click on next. Now, once you have clicked edit your information, that pane is going to expand even further to show you what your learner identification information is in LMS. So you can see your name, your email address that you use to sign up for training. If you're an agency, you would see your agency name. You can also see your Provider Medicaid ID and your tax ID number if you have entered one into the system. But please note that your tax ID is not required when you register for EVV training. So that's just a field that's in LMS but shouldn't have anything in it. So the key here is to verify your Medicaid Provider ID and verify that it is 7 digits long, because an ID that is either shorter or longer than 7 digits is not an ODM Medicaid Provider ID, because they are always 7 digits long. There could even just be a typo with an extra 0 or something else in there, but that's the first thing to check. You would also want to verify that it is not your DODD or ODA contract ID that's been entered into that field, or your NPI number. So basically just make sure that it's the correct ID and that you only have your Provider Medicaid ID listed in that field. Now, as you're looking at the number that's listed for you in that Provider Medicaid ID field, if you find at this point that you would need to edit that field or that number, to edit, you could just click into the field and change the number, and then click Update. If you're looking at that Provider Medicaid ID number and you realize that it is correct and everything is as it should be, then you could just click the Close button that shows up at the bottom of this pane. And you could either log out of LMS at this time, or you could go back to view your learners' courses or do whatever you need to do. So getting back to the criteria for accessing Sandata's EVV system, once training has been completed and you have been marked as having your training completed by Sandata, you would register and log into the eTrack portal. Now, the eTrack portal is where you could request devices for individuals. If you're going to be using an ODM provisioned EVV device in the home of the individual, or it is where you could log a support request with the EVV provider hotline. And you could also see communication back and forth with support on those requests. But in order to register in eTrack, you must also have your correct 7-digit Medicaid Provider ID. So that's another reason why having that information is important. And I want to point out that today's webinar purpose is to help you get the information in place in order to access Sandata's EVV system and know the criteria. But if you've been through training, EVV training, you already know that how to register in eTrack and the steps to do that are covered in training. So we're not going to focus on that in today's webinar. Instead, I just want to note that instructions for registering in and using eTrack can be found in Chapter 5 of the Agency Training Manual and Chapter 4 of the Non-Agency Training Manual. Training manuals can also be found on the training page of ODM's EVV website, and the link for that is currently listed on the slide. Now, once you have registered and logged into eTrack, as long as your training has been completed, you would be able to see and download your Sandata Welcome Kit. The welcome kit will have your login and your initial temporary password for getting into your SanData EVV web portal account, along with initial login instructions. It would also contain a call reference guide on how to log visits through telephony, the phone numbers that you would call to do that. So there's a lot of helpful information in that welcome kit, but you would not see that welcome kit and be able to download it again until you have actually completed training. Finally, we're going to review how to ensure that your provider information is current and up to date with ODM. Now, before we do that, you may be wondering, why is this so important? Because ODM has stressed this several times in the EVV newsletter. They talk about it in just about every provider-facing meeting that they have. And this is because if you are a non-agency provider or an independent provider, the email address on file in MITS is the one that is used to create your username in SanData's EVV system. And if you are an agency provider, the email address on file in MITS is used to create the initial login to SanData's EVV system. That's the first login that you would first use to get in, and then set up any additional users that you might need to. The email address in MITS is also the email address that must be used to register an eTrack. So if you attempt to use a different email address that is not in MITS, you're going to see an error message telling you that it doesn't match the information that's on file with ODM. And finally, all communication updates from ODM that are either sent to a physical mailing address, email address, and/or phone number are sent using the contact information that is on file in MITS. So to ensure that you don't miss any key updates from ODM regarding EVV or the EVV program, this is another important reason to make sure your information is up to date. So if you are thinking at this time that it would be a good time to go in and do that, even if you have been a provider for many years, maybe your phone number has changed over that time, or you set up a new email account because a prior one had issues, or was for a person who's no longer with your organization if you're an agency. The way that you would do that is to log into the MITS portal, and that's at www.ohmits.com. That's the only address we read on today's webinar because it's short enough and easy enough to remember. But you would see the login screen that is currently listed on this slide, and you would put in your user ID and your password. Check the yes, I have read the agreement, because you're going to see that provider user MITS portal agreement again, and then you would click login. Once logged in, you are going to see a section at the top of the screen called providers. And if you hover over providers, you get additional options that appear, and one of those options is demographic maintenance. So you would click on demographic maintenance. Once you're on the demographic maintenance screen, you'll see additional options in blue show up, and one of them is the location, name, and address option, and that is called out by a red circle on the screen. You would want to click on location, name, and address, and that will bring you to a screen, and it'll actually show an additional blue box on your screen called location, name, and address, and you're going to see several rows of information listed. So for example, based on this screenshot, you can see that the rows include home office, mail to, fax to, and service location. You could have an address, an email address, information listed in every single one of these rows. However, it's key to note that it is the service location row that feeds information to eTrack into SanData. So you'll want to take a look specifically at that service location row and make sure that the address, email address, and phone number are accurate and listed there. And if you don't have information listed there, that's when you would want to click on that row, change or add the information, and save that information. Now, when you click on that row, there's going to be a name type and an option to select personal or business name to make updates. If you're an independent provider, you would have the personal name option selected. If you are an agency provider, you would have the business name selected, but here is where you would make your changes and then click Save. And that Save button is called out in the lower right-hand corner with that red circle around it. All right, at this point, we've covered a lot of information, and we want to open up the lines to any questions that anyone might have. So to ask your question, you can navigate to the webinar bar by hovering over the top middle of your screen, and then click the chat icon and type in your question. And we're going to give a few moments for those to come in, and then we will answer them live over the phone. Okay, one of the questions that has come in is, I represent an agency that is in the process of getting approval for an alternate system to the SANDATA system. So you're using a different EVV system and setting up that interface between your alt system and the SANDATA aggregator. So the question is, am I correct, we still need to take the classroom training with SANDATA? And the answer to this depends on whether your alternate EVV system will be set up and in place, or in other words, if you are certified to have that system up and running by August 5th, 2019, because that is the mandated use date for all providers who are providing EVV eligible services in phase 2 of the EVV program. If you're working with your vendor right now and you're not sure whether they'll be through the certification process by August 5th, I would recommend going ahead and taking training because that mandated use date means either information needs to be coming through your alternate system or it needs to be entered into SANDATA. But either way, you'd want to make sure that it's getting into the SANDATA aggregator somehow. So taking that training would be a good way to know how SANDATA works in case you need to use that come August 5th. The next question we have is, when will this be posted to the ODM YouTube page? And this probably means that you've seen a video or a webinar before, so good for you, that's great. It technically gets posted to YouTube, but the easiest way to access it, it will be posted to the ODM EVV Initiatives webpage through the webinar section. We like to say go ahead and give that several days. It does need to be sent to the ODM web team to get posted. So I'd say by early next week, you should be able to log in and find that. And then the slides for today's webinar will also be posted there. The next question, I tried to log into OHMITS. Was that .gov or .com? And that is ohmits.gov is the web page for the MITS portal. We have another question here. Where do you go to get your welcome kit again? And that would be through the eTrack portal from SANDATA. And keep in mind that you would not want to log in to try to access your welcome kit until you have taken the EVV training. And you do learn the step-by-step instructions on how to do that when you take the EVV training. Okay, there's another question here regarding data entry in the SANDATA EVV system. The question is, at the time of doing data entry for clients, so you're entering a new client into the SANDATA EVV system, there comes up a client ID field besides the client name and Medicaid ID. What information am I supposed to fill in there? You may notice that that client ID field is grayed out. You can't actually put your cursor into that field and type in any information. That's because once you click Create Client and you add that client to your account, a client ID will be automatically assigned to that client. This is a unique identifier by the SANDATA EVV system. So the next time you go into that client's profile after you set it up, there will be an ID in that field for you. I want to back up and clarify the answer that I gave to a question recently, and that was the question about, is it .gov or .com to the OHMITS portal? So we've been doing some internal testing here, and the .gov is the extension if you're trying to access that internally, which is why we see .gov. But if you're a provider trying to access that MITS portal outside of ODM, it is going to be ohmits.com. Apologize for the confusion. Technically both are correct, but what you're looking for is .com. Okay, we have another question that has come in. I am a passport COAA provider. How do I locate my Medicaid number? I've never used the MITS portal before. The steps earlier in the presentation on how to find your Medicaid Provider ID include steps for finding that through the Ohio Department of Aging website. I would recommend using those steps. We have covered those today, but if you would like to see those steps along with screenshots, the slides for today's presentation are going to be posted to ODM's EVV Initiatives webpage, specifically on the webinar section. And I'm going to go ahead and navigate to that and show you where that is now so that anybody can see that. Okay, so I have brought up the ODM EVV Initiatives webpage. All right, I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. And you'll notice on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a section called Webinars. If you were to click on that Webinars section, it brings up a page that shows any ongoing webinars that there might be. And keep in mind, we will have webinars for July and August posted here, so I'd encourage everybody to check back. But if you scroll down, you're going to see past webinar presentations and corresponding slides. And this is where you're going to see today's presentation posted as well. So I'm going to back up one step here so that you can see that once you're on the ODM EVV Initiatives webpage, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. You would go to that webinar section on the right. Okay, we have a question here from a provider. It says, I took the EVV training December 2017, so that would have been for phase 1 of the EVV program, and never received a welcome kit. Also, our agency's name was not an option in the drop-down box, and I was not able to add it. What I would recommend is well, first of all, I want to let you know that the EVV system has been updated for phase 2 of the EVV program. So keep in mind that there are some things that you would want to learn and be brought up to speed on. And there has been a training put together for providers who did already go through phase 1 training for EVV. It's called the Bridge Training. You'll see the link for that through, and I'm going to navigate here on the web page to the training section of the ODM EVV Initiatives page. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, because you'll notice that it says here if you had login credentials for the SAN data system, and if you took training in December 2017, chances are you probably have a welcome kit. You just may not have registered an e-track or downloaded it. But there is a link here on the website to take Bridge Training. You'd scroll down and you could find that. But for your particular agency, just to make sure that you get registered for the right training and to work through the situation with your welcome kit, I would recommend reaching out to the EVV provider hotline, and that is specifically at 855-805-3505. Okay, the next question is, do I go into SANDATA to get to eTrack to download the welcome kit? I already took the training. So eTrack is a separate web page. It's a separate portal. If you took training, they reviewed the instructions that are in the training manual, but if you'd like to take a look at the training manual, again, it does walk you through those steps and give the web link that you would want to access. The training manuals are actually showing up right now on ODM's webpage because I'm already in that training section. Just note that there is an agency training manual and a non-agency training manual. So depending on what type of provider you are, you'd want to select the proper training manual. And that's just because agencies have a few more functions that they need to do in the EVV portal, so their training manual is a little bit different versus an independent provider or non-agency provider. So you can find instructions for accessing eTrack in either of those manuals. Okay, the next question, how do I access the general screen to fix exceptions? So this is about logging into the EVV portal once you have an account set up and you've logged visits, and then how to manage those visits. There's a couple different things that you could do here. You could log into the LMS portal and review the self-paced training today on visit maintenance if you'd like a review of how that works. I believe there's also a recorded webinar for this on ODM's webpage, but I also want to note that July's webinar topic includes how to log in and do visit maintenance. So how to manage your visits, including resolving exceptions, adjusting call-in and call-out times if need be. So it would cover that information. And dates and registration links for the July webinars are going to be posted in the next week or so as well, since today is the last June webinar. Okay, the next question is, how long does the EVV training take? Then we can notify all office staff to be present for the training. This really depends on the training route that you choose. If you are eligible to take the instructor-led webinar trainings, and eligibility really depends on whether you have already been using EVV or if you are brand new to it. So if you're brand new to EVV, you're eligible to take the instructor-led webinar training. But if that is the route that you choose, webinars are scheduled in blocks. So there's 4 blocks that you would take as an agency. And so it would really just depend on the date and time you schedule that, and blocks are generally 2 hours long. If you take the self-paced training, it's self-paced, so it's a little difficult to give you an estimate on that. It would really just depend on the learning speed of your staff and any questions that they might have, if you want to pause the training, so on and so forth. If you are thinking of the classroom training, this is set aside for all agency providers. So there is a limit to how many people you can send from your particular agency. Each provider ID can send up to 2 people if you are an agency. So you could choose maybe a primary person who's going to be using EVV and a backup in your agency, and then you would use a train the trainer approach and go back and share that information with the rest of the people in your team, or they could take the self-paced training and the people who went to the classroom can share anything else that they might have picked up or found helpful. If you'd like to talk through that further and options for training, I recommend reaching out to the EVV provider hotline. They can give you a little more background info and help you get set up and registered for the route that you'd like to take. And again, that provider hotline number is 855-805-3505. The next question is, are we required to submit claims through the MITS portal? Our agency currently only bills through DODD and the Passport CareSource portal. The answer to that is you would continue billing the same way that you do today. So no, you would not have to bill through MITS. Okay, the next question is, I took EVV Phase 2 training, took the training class in person. I'm looking for that particular video from that day, can't find it. Is there a particular place where that might be? So the training classes that are provided in person or by the instructor-led EVV training webinars are not recorded. They're different than the webinar that we're doing right now. Today's webinar is like an ongoing informational and educational webinar, and ODM does these almost on a monthly basis, pretty often. And the topics vary by the feedback and questions that we get coming in from providers. These webinars are recorded and posted to their webinars page in case other providers may not have the opportunity to attend these sessions. But the EVV trainings themselves are not recorded. So if you are looking for maybe a refresher of the information that you learned in that EVV training, I'd recommend logging into LMS and registering for the self-paced training, because that's essentially the same training that you had in the classroom, and you're able to walk through that at your own pace. So if there's a particular section that you're just looking for a refresher on, that'll offer you the opportunity to do that. There's a request here to repeat the number for the EVV provider hotline in case you have questions on registering for training or accessing your welcome kit. And that number is 855-805-3505. There's a question for somebody who unfortunately couldn't join until a little bit later in the webinar. Will this be offered again? This particular topic, this is the last day that it is slated to be presented live at this time. However, today's webinar has been recorded, and it is going to be posted to ODM's EVV initiatives page under the webinar section. So you can actually find the entire recording from today there. You can also find the slides from today's presentation posted there as well. Please just allow about a week, 5 business days, in order for that to get posted. We have another question here. How do I register with the Molina Medicaid number? That is, this person is a MyCare Ohio provider, and they're asking about the Molina portal. And there could be more nuance to the question here, but to make sure that we get you the best answer possible, if you would, please just reach out to evv@medicaid.ohio.gov. That is the ODM EVV team here. They'll work with you directly and walk you through to make sure that you get the right information. Okay, the next couple of questions actually relate to each other. One is, when will classroom training in Cincinnati be held? And then the other is LMS question mark. So what is LMS again? And this is specifically looking and asking about self-directed training. So for both of those answers, so if you need to find self-directed training, classroom training schedules, webinar training, instructor-led webinar training schedules, they are all housed in Sandata's learning management system. That's what LMS is. If it doesn't sound familiar, chances are you may not have registered in LMS before. Instructions on how to register in LMS and how to use that, I believe they are on the ODM EVV Initiatives webpage. Sorry, I had to check myself there real quick. No, it's actually on the page I'm on right now. Let me just scroll down. There we go. Agency training registration quick reference guide is where my mouse is right now. So there is a link specifically for agency training. I'm going to open that up just as an example so you can see. There's also a non-agency training registration quick reference guide. But this quick reference guide will walk you step by step through how you would access the correct LMS training portal. So there is one specifically for agencies and non-agencies, which is why they're separated, and how you would go through the steps of setting up an LMS or learning management system account. And then it also walks you through how you would actually register for a course. But this is where you would find registration for self-paced classes. You would also find the entire schedule for the Cincinnati location of classrooms and which ones are still available. Just a quick note about classroom trainings, that there are other training locations available. So it's good to take a look at those in LMS. And if you're considering classroom training versus another training, for instance, self-paced or instructor-led, we have had very positive feedback from providers who attend in person in the classrooms, because you are actually able to log visits in the devices. You're able to get hands-on in the web portal, walk through training scenarios, ask questions of your instructor right there in person. Especially for folks who are hands-on type learners, it's found to be the best route of training for them. So definitely something to keep in mind. All right, it doesn't appear that we have any other new questions in the chat box at this time. So I want to go ahead and encourage anybody who is still wondering about something or has a question to go ahead and type it into the chat box at this time. Otherwise, we will look to close down the webinar in about 3 minutes. Okay, we do have another question that's come in. I've come to learn that there was online webinar for agency EVV phase training too, and that's correct. There are instructor-led webinars. Can I access those videos online now, and if so, how? So the instructor-led online webinars are live training classes, kind of like this one. They go over the same material that the classroom trainings do. They are not recorded because they are given on a pretty frequent basis, and the recorded versions of those sessions are basically the self-paced training as well. So if you would like to review that material again in a recorded video, you would want to register for the self-paced training, and you can take that as many times as you like. That will remain available to you throughout the life of the EVV program, so it will always be there for you to refer back to. That's going to be the best route for that. The page that we were just on, actually I still am on, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. This is the training page of the ODM EVV initiative page, and it includes that quick reference guide to get back into LMS, and that's where you can enroll in that self-paced training. Here's the link to register for training. Here's the training manual itself. Okay, so all that good information about training, including how to use LMS, you can find on this ODM EVV Initiatives training page. Okay, we haven't received any other new questions at this time. So we are going to go ahead and close the webinar, but if you do have any questions about how to use the SANdata EVV system, how to register for training, if you need assistance in registering for training, I would encourage you to reach out to that EVV provider hotline at 855-805-3505. If you have any questions about the EVV program rules itself, you could reach out to the EVV team at ODM at evv@medicaid.ohio.gov. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to attend today's webinar. Just a quick reminder, there will be additional webinars offered in the future, so be sure to keep an eye out in your email and also ODM's webinars page for when those get posted. Thank you and have a great day.